What's up, everybody, and welcome to Growing Up Gaming, your weekly podcast where we meet a new person of the internet to discuss their childhood with gaming and how it inspired their lives today. My name is Mitch Power. Again, thank you guys so much for joining each and every week to the show. Hope you're subscribing there on iTunes or Google Play or watching it on YouTube. Whichever you are, I really appreciate it. This is episode 100, which is kind of crazy because if you had told me 2 years ago when I started the show that I would be at episode 100 and I would have talked to 100 different people about their stories and not miss a week of the episodes, I would have told you that seems insane and crazy. But here we are, and I am very happy for your guys' support, and you guys have given me so many awesome stories over the years. It actually has been years. It'll be 2 years in May. So, again, thank you guys so much for your continued support and everything. This week on the show, we have our guest. His name is Brandon Richards. This is actually one of my best friends. I met this man about 8 or 9 years ago. So what's cool is we met as adults, and we've been playing games ever since. But I actually did not know his history with gaming or what got him started, or him and his brother Bryant have been playing games with me ever since I have moved to Arizona, basically. So we get to hear his stories and everything. If you guys want to be in the show just like he was, go ahead and send me a tweet at MitchPower1116 on Twitter, or at the podcast Twitter page, which is at GUG Podcast on Twitter. Without further ado, let's get things started. Episode 100 with Brandon Richards. Do you remember the first time you started playing games? Do you remember what got you started? Was it a family member, friend, thing you saw in a magazine? What was it that initially got you started?
As far as a start to gaming, we kind of started, both me and my brother, since we were only a year apart. We had a great experience with our dad purchasing us an original Nintendo. Since we were obviously both born in the late 80s, by the time we had come to age to start playing video games, our dad had kind of gained some interest. He kind of liked Super Mario way back in the day. So he had brought home a console for us. And, we were a middle-class family, so having a console in the house was a ton of fun for us, obviously. But we really started with mostly just the Mario games. That was something that my dad had a lot of interest in, and then we kind of moved on to some other titles on the console over the years. RC Pro-Am became one of my favorite games. Bryant became a really big fan of the Ninja Turtles, and then the library just kind of grew from there. So.
Did he initially get it? Did he have an interest in gaming and then kind of was just like, hey kids, check this out? Or did he, I wonder what it was that initially sparked the interest to get it?
So we were originally very much into board games as children, since there was 4 of us total. I have 2 older sisters and then my 1 younger brother. We both kind of stemmed and took off onto the video game route, where they took more to the books and board game side. So originally my dad had said that this was something for all of us to kind of indulge in together, but realistically ended up turning into more of an obsession for myself and for my brother.
I mean, that seems to happen too, though, because like I said, I have 2 younger sisters, and video games were always around the house, but they just didn't really seem to give a shit. They were just like, okay, I guess that's in the house and everything. So they didn't really care too much about what I was playing or anything. It was more or less for me. But of course, the other thing too is when you're little, you have to say, oh, it's for everybody, and share it with your brothers and sisters. But then eventually people gravitate towards it.
It's very true. It becomes a process. There are definitely people in the house who are using it far more often than other people. And at the time though, with only 1 television in the house, it became a bit more tricky. So I would always end up playing together with my brother as opposed to by myself at the time, just because it was here's your block. Here's the time that you get with the television tonight before Cheers starts. Let's go.
Fucking Cheers, right? Dude, I remember my dad was the same thing. If there was a Sunday marathon with John Wayne movies, I wasn't playing shit. He's like, nope, you gotta go outside and do some other shit. We are not doing this today. John Wayne's on all day. And I'm like, I guess that's a sign. And then eventually, it got to a point where I nagged my dad so much that he bought probably some TV off somebody who stole it, and it was like, this is your TV in your room now. And that's the only reason why I got a TV in my room. I never had, I didn't even have cable hooked up to it or anything. I had a VCR that had a game system attached to it, and that was literally it. But again, I'm sure my dad found it through people who were probably not getting it by legal means. Mm-hmm. Because neighborhood I lived in was quite shady. So all of a sudden people would show up to my dad's house and was like, do you want to buy this TV or some meat? And my dad's just like, sure, why not? So, yeah. And then the other thing, too, is you I mean, of course, like, for context, Brandon's literally one of my best friends. I've known him for close to 10 years. Mm-hmm. Something like that. So me and him and his brother Bryant have been playing games ever since. But like, also being a year apart from your brother, that makes it quite easy to be pretty much into the same shit. Like, it's not like there's that
general interest.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, there's not that big of an age difference and everything to where, because I've had guests on the show where like their difference in age gap is like 8 years, and I'm like, yeah, that's a big difference when you're trying to deal with like your big brother's into next level shit and you're still into video games, and he's like into girls and whatever the fuck people are in high school and shit. Like, there's just such a big age difference. So
no, I completely agree. It was always super easy to spend time together too, because we were literally 1 year and 1 month apart. So all of our interests were the same because we grew up in the same time frame for, games, movies, school, all those things.
I didn't realize how close you guys were together. Holy shit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very, very close. It's always, and the other thing that kind of, tacks onto that too is that it's super easy to kind of fall into the category of best friends outside of just being brothers, just because of how close you guys are in proximity to age and how much time you spend together.
Right.
Plus sharing all of the same interests, always one of the easiest people to get along with.
I would have traded 2 of my sisters for a brother in fucking 5 seconds. Like, oh my God.
Oh man.
They just didn't have, I mean, the cool thing was, like, at least my sisters attempted for like 2 seconds to try to be interested in the thing I was interested in. And then eventually it was just like, I don't give a shit about any of this. Like, why am I wasting? I remember my sister over a Christmas break one time was like, show me how to play Pokemon cards. And I was like, okay, cool. And we had like starter decks and we started playing. And then after like 2 games, she's like, this is fucking stupid. And just like stopped completely. I was like, okay, well, thanks for being bored enough to give a shit for 5 seconds and everything.
Yeah, I think my parents probably really found the secret sauce with having 2 girls to start with and then 2 boys to follow, because each of us kind of like stayed in our own lines, and that's how we got so addicted to video games, was that they always wanted to do other stuff, and we'd be like, yeah, well, just leave us alone to our own devices. This is where we'll hang out.
Right, as long as Cheers wasn't on, because if Cheers was on, fuck off, right?
Yeah, then Dad was like, turn it. That's what we did.
Go away. We're not doing this.
So it started out with the process. We were on the Nintendo all the time, and then I think it was a combination of 2 different things. One specific scenario, and then always being tied into the TV, that we ended up getting a second smaller television for another part of the house so that we could play games on it.
Of course.
Now that specific scenario is tied to the television was always centrally located, like in the living room, and my mother used to be this collector of these small like China plates and China coasters and things like that. Well, one day we had a set of the coasters on top of the television. It was one of those older wood grain type televisions.
Oh, of course,
like a big old, like, I think it was a 32-inch one at the time, so it was just massive. And she would keep some of the little pieces on top of that. Well, one day, me and Bryant were playing a game called Bad Dudes, and we accidentally ripped off a couple of them coasters and broke them, and that eliminated us completely from that television as far as being able to use it going forward. So that specific instance was like the first bad experience I ever had with a video game, because it obviously came with quite an ass whipping, and then from there, I mean, I own a copy of that game to this day as a collector, but I've never played it since. It's like you're
Vietnam. It's like, I'll never
literally
go back.
Mm-hmm. I've never played it since that day.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad moment, dude. I remember. Just, for example, those racetracks that you put the cars in and you hold the button down and the car goes around in the circle? One time, I was a fucking moron, and in my grandma's front yard, there was a sprinkler, and I was just jumping through the sprinkler, having fun as a kid. What I didn't realize is I was soaking wet, and I just ran through my grandma's house, like completely soaking wet. She got pissed off and did old school grandma shit, pulled apart the racetrack and smacked my ass with it. Since then, I don't ever want to see one of those things again.
That I can understand.
Dude, but again, as a parent, I look back now, I was like, God, I should have gotten my ass beat. I was literally just soaking, dripping wet, didn't dry off, just ran through the house flinging water. And my grandma's like, what the fuck is going on? So, yeah, my grandma's from West Virginia. She's old school.
I got you. We're from the Midwest, so we spent a lot of time indoors during the winter because there was just too much, snow on the ground at all times. So during the summer, I mean, we had a swing set. We were still children, but we definitely became more like introverted as soon as we kind of recognized video games. It just became like the thing we like to do. So,
did your parents ever give you shit like get the fuck out of the house and go do something?
Well, I feel like every parent probably did that. To an extent. I mean, we were never so bad to where we where we had to be forced out of the house. But I mean, there would be times where, you know, you'd be playing a game and you never kept track of time because you're a child. You know, you just didn't care about things like that. You would wake up.
You don't have to do shit. You just do you.
You'd wake up, play a video game until lunchtime, eat a couple of hot dogs, and then go back to playing video games again. Like, that's just what we did.
Right. And I mean, like, because I know some parents out there are like, oh, video games are bad. You should go out and do something. Like, go play basketball or go out and do shit. Like, I mean, I never had that problem because I was always out doing shit. But also, too, there was moments where I was out doing shit, but then I would end up at a buddy's house still playing video games. Like... Yeah. It wasn't like, oh, like, let me leave and actually do outdoor things. But yeah, I grew up in Illinois, and same thing, dude. During wintertime, fuck snow, man. Like, snow is fun when you're a kid, but then you get wet slightly, and you're like, I'm fucking over this. Like, it
gets very annoying very quickly.
Yeah, so. You can't do that shit and everything. So winter breaks were always the best because it was 2 weeks of sit your ass in the house and play new video games. Basically.
No, absolutely.
Then, like, as far as it goes, like, with getting games and stuff, was it... Like, were you guys getting games? I mean, the cool thing, though, is that you and Bryant are basically so close to each other that... Hold on. When are your birthdays again? I'm trying to remember.
So my birthday is January 6th.
Would you get fucked hard on Christmas shit?
Kind of, yeah. And then his birthday is February 10th.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so he's very close.
Not really spread out, but you got kind of 3 games... Because it would... I mean, I'm assuming it would be like birthday, Christmas would be your time to get games.
Yeah. I would say the majority of our video gaming items that we acquired, like, over the years, like, before we could obtain our own money, were predominantly through Christmas time.
Right.
So, you know, we were just talking about winter. I remember in Christmas of, like, I want to say it was 97, 98 was when we finally got onto the next system. So we spent years with the original Nintendo, and then we moved on to the PlayStation 1. That was the next transition into gaming for us.
Damn, you skipped NES, Genesis, all that?
Yeah, so we went straight from the Nintendo to the PlayStation 1 because, again, being middle class, there wasn't necessarily systems that we could afford at all times. So my grandmother actually purchased a PlayStation 1 for us. I believe it was either Christmas in 97 or 98. We got a copy of NASCAR 98, Crash Bandicoot, and it was off to the races again. It was like falling in love with games all over again.
Yeah, especially going from an NES to a PlayStation, just because that's such a giant jump in technology. So you're just like, holy shit! Like, look at this.
And my dad had recently upgraded his television as well. So we had a more top of the line TV for the time, as well as the PlayStation. And again, my dad kind of gets drawn into certain types of games. So, you know, we spent a ton of time. We were really big NASCAR fans in our youth. So, you know, we grew up playing the NASCAR games a lot. There was a game specifically for the PlayStation 1 that was called Destruction Derby and Destruction Derby 2 that I was absolutely addicted to forever, it seemed like, when I was a child. You know, and then a lot of the staples, you know, Crash Bandicoot, Twisted Metal. I was a really big fan of, like, the original Parappa the Rapper, and then the introduction of, like, the Tony Hawk series and stuff like that.
Yeah, what's funny is, like, I remember a demo disc for Parappa the Rapper, and I just didn't understand the concept of rhythm games, so I'm just hitting buttons off fucking all the time, and I'm like, this game sucks. And, like, no, I'm just fucking stupid and don't know how to play rhythm games. Like, it'd be better if I knew how to play rhythm games. I just thought the game was stupid. I'm like, this is stupid. And then later I play it, I'm like, oh, this makes complete sense why I sucked at the game. As far as did you get that PlayStation as, like, a combo gift, as, like, this is you and your brothers, or, like, because sometimes that would happen too, where they would be a family gift, but then only, you know, one person would really play it. Obviously, you and Bryant played the shit out of it together and everything. So
it was definitely more of a family gift, but again, it was another one of those situations where after just a short amount of time, you know, others start to lose interest while we continued to gain interest in the item. So it was originally purchased as a family gift and then changed.
Did as far as it goes, did any of your sisters ever play games with you? Like, did they ever do any co-op games, or did they ever take turns playing games with you, or ever hang out with you? Because I know some sisters and everything weren't as much into playing games, but they were more into just hanging out and watching other people play games. Did they ever do anything, or were they kind of just like, that's your guys' thing?
I would say they were always kind of more separated from us. You know, even though we were obviously one larger family, I mean, it was always definitely me and my brother hanging out, and then, like, my 2 sisters hanging out, as opposed to, like, as a big whole outside of, like, you know, family dinner, stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like I said, and also their interests, like I said, for the most part, my sisters had zero interest in gaming. Like, they just didn't really, except for my sister for 1 year asked for an N64, which I wasn't going to complain about. I was like, sure, if you want to get that, go ahead. I'll fucking play it because I know you will play it for a little bit and then stop. So as far as it goes with, that's crazy you skipped Genesis and Super Nintendo.
So the thing was that, again, it wasn't necessarily a system that we didn't play on. So it was just a system that we didn't own specifically. So like we were always around, we both had friends who had, the Genesis, the Super Nintendo, and we would play them regularly. But this was the next step up for us as far as like, transition from console that we owned to the next console that we owned.
Right. Yeah. And then I was going to say, so I mean, because obviously you guys had friends in the neighborhood and stuff like that. So you would go over their house and just play whatever it was that they had.
Yeah, of course. Like you remember back in our time, it was still more appropriate for people to just spend hours of a day at somebody else's house playing games. So instead of having to purchase, a unit, we would have a couple of different friends that we would go play Super Nintendo, a couple that would play Genesis, and just kind of go from there.
Yeah. And then with, because back in the day, like I remember staying at my buddy Gary's house so often to the point where their mom was like, go home. Like, you've been here all fucking day. Like, you've been here for 4 days or something. She's just like, go home. Like, hang out at home for a little bit and then come back. So she was probably like, your parents are probably worried. And I was like, no, my parents are good.
No, I completely understand. It was a very similar situation for us. We never had to necessarily worry about that. We had a very small clump of people in our neighborhood that were all really close knit. So it was, you could usually find us in one of those spaces.
Did you ever, I mean, obviously you had the rental era where you had to go to your Blockbusters and your rental places. And of course there were way more mom and pop shops back then. Did you ever rent games for your friends' consoles because you didn't have one?
Oh, yeah. We used to do that all the time. I had a friend who lived across the street from us. His name was Dennis, and which is funny because he shared the same name as my father. And we used to rent games for his Super Nintendo all the time, just whichever one of us had money.
Right. Yeah. And, of course, the rentals, those were fun processes because, I mean, having to be there. Like, it's so crazy. Like, they were talking about this on the radio the other day. Within 30 years, a business went from nothing to $1 billion business. Like, Blockbusters were fucking everywhere, and now they're dead. Like, that's the craziest thing to think about within 30 years, how something goes from nothing to being one of the biggest things ever, worth $1 billion, to back to nothing.
What I think another really funny like little piece to that too is that there was a company that actually used to compete in our old hometown with Blockbuster that was called Family Video, and the Blockbuster closed, but the Family Video is still open to this day, which I thought was always kind of wild.
Shout out to Family Video. They're in Illinois as well, and they did the same thing. Like, because I used to work at Game Crazy, which was Hollywood Video. That was like, obviously when I worked there, it was still fine. That was like 2005, 2006, something like that. But then Family Video literally opened up, and it was a brand new video store. And I was like, that's fucking crazy to think like, oh, let's just open this brand new. And it looked like a chain. It didn't look like just a mom and pop shop. It actually looked like a chain. And straight up, they're still around in Illinois. It's insane. Like,
they still exist and they're still kicking. I mean, you can go out to their Facebook page, their Twitter page. They still post on the daily. I mean, it's pretty crazy.
Like, that's insane to think about that. I mean, again, it's just like, of course, certain niche markets. Like, again, I think Midwest though, just people out. I'm not gonna say people out there are stupid or don't do streaming or whatever, but like they just still enjoy that shit. They still enjoy that feeling of going to do those things. Whereas like, you try to open up a fucking Family Video in San Francisco and they'd laugh your ass out. They'd be like, what are you doing? Like, we have streaming, we do digital downloads, we don't do it, more technologically savvy in certain areas. So, whereas Midwest, dude, Redbox is still kicking it, but that's only around because that's a machine and not paying a person.
I think that'll likely be the next one to go there too. So
yeah, I mean, the only thing is, as long as they have games in the red boxes, I think people still do it. But by the way, that's fucking stupid. Who wants to rent a game for a day? Like, by the way, it will take you a day to download the fucking dude. Division 2, apparently their day one patch on PS4 is like 80 gigs.
Oof, okay.
That's a fucking game. Like, by the time you get that game, put it in there and download the patch, you maybe have hopefully you got fast internet, because you're not going to be playing it very much for just one day. So
yeah, that structure doesn't really seem to work as much with like games nowadays, than it did a few years back even. So.
Well, right, because I mean, games didn't have these ridiculous day one patches, and they were, I don't know, fixed before they were released. They didn't come out broke as fuck.
Oh, of course. Of course.
Yeah.
So
Shout out to
we, yeah. So we obviously became really more of like hardcore gamers around the PlayStation 1 era. Right. And then we very quickly ascended into the Dreamcast days. And this is where I would say that me and Bryant started to become most addicted to video games, I would say, as far as total time spent playing. You would go to school, wake up in the morning, go to school, come home, you'd be playing games. And you would do that until you were forced to do your homework, and then you would move on to the next day. I mean, that's literally how cyclical it got for us during that period of time.
I mean, also, too, though, that's like, I would assume most kids, when you get into video games, especially when you get hooked into a certain extent, like, that is your entire day. Like, that's all you want to do is just go home, or go to school because you had to, do your homework because you had to, but then the only free time you had to do whatever you want, you were just playing games and everything.
Well, that was also kind of around the time that we started to, really cultivate like our interest in sports as well. So the 2K series on the original Dreamcast, on top of, some of the other titles on the system itself, really kind of like kept us hooked all the time. Jet Set Radio was one that I think that we spent just hours in front of a television playing. Crazy Taxi was actually one of the first games that kind of drew my sisters into interest in video games as well, just because it was like this psychotic amount of just color and everything flying around on the screen at all times, and it was really upbeat. It had a really good soundtrack, and it was just fun to play. So I think that that's probably what kind of like drew them in. But and then for me personally, it was always Shenmue. That was kind of the first game that got me into let's skip a shower to keep gaming.
Yeah, because teenage boys and showering. Who the fuck needs that, right? Like that's as I'm growing to know. Like Alex is just like. I'm like, dude, you need to go shower. Like, please go shower. Like, he just doesn't realize it yet, how important showers are. But again, back then, I mean, it's not like you did much. You didn't, physically exert your body sitting there playing games. So who cares, right? Who cares?
And you weren't quite, at that point in the age of that Dreamcast, we weren't quite at that age, where you really, really start to notice those items or those things. So,
sure, of course.
So that was why.
Did you guys get the Dreamcast when it went like dirt cheap, or did you guys get it prior to the fucking downfall of Dreamcast?
No, we definitely bought it like in its heyday when it was still somewhat of a prestigious console, I guess. So I mean, it wasn't something that we paid because it was on sale. It was a system that we bought not long after it came out. Again, for another Christmas, we bought it with a couple of games to continue to collect games. Over its short lifespan to continue playing. So it was really a bummer when the system itself. When you kind of caught wind through gaming magazines that it was going to get the nix soon because of, the PS2 coming along. And, it was definitely, kind of a sad day. I thought, because I was such a big fan of the console itself, to where, once we found out that companies were starting to, shy away from developing for that unit and moving more onto the PlayStation 2, it definitely sucked, especially after how much money you'd spent on it.
Yeah. Well, also, too, the money spent, but also, too, that system was so advanced for its time, too. Like, it had all these things that, it had online, it had the VMU, it had just graphically, it was such a big difference, and it was first in that genre, first in that like era where it was like better 3D graphics and everything.
Yeah, so. collecting the colored iterations of the memory cards for the controllers was actually like one of my favorite things to do, like in that time frame. Like I was really big into like finding the different versions of those VMUs to collect.
Yeah, it's crazy because like I didn't have as much experience with the Dreamcast just because money wise, like I had PlayStation 1, but then it got to a point where I started skateboarding and completely stopped giving a shit about games. So I didn't really care about video games as much. Like I would basically just play whatever new Tony Hawk game was around on my friends' consoles, and that's about it. But like, yeah, like started working at Game Crazy, and you get those people that come in and are just like, "Where's your Dreamcast section?" Like they just don't give a fuck about anything else. They're just like, "Where's Dreamcast?" So that's always fine. I mean, like I said, did they ever have different? So they had. I'm actually looking it up now. So they had different colored VMUs. Did they ever have different colored consoles and stuff for Dreamcast?
So with the Dreamcast itself, obviously it felt like it was more geared toward like the Japanese crowd, I thought,
right? Because
there were definitely some different versions of the console that you saw launch overseas. But outside of the original console, and then I know that there was the Sega Sports All Black Edition that released in the United States.
I think I remember that one. Yeah,
I don't recall any other. I'm sure that there are a few like different versions, but none that I can remember off the top of my head.
Right. No, I remember. Yeah, like I remember the all black one because I remember seeing one. Like, so one of those came into the store and everything. Because I remember Game Crazy, like, people would trade shit into Game Crazy, not giving a shit really, like what they got. But also, I mean, that's also the most part. But also, Game Crazy never traded in prices based off rarity, but they never sold it based off rarity either. So, like, we would give people $3 for Chrono Trigger, but then we would sell it for $10. Like, they weren't GameStop where they were like, here's $4 for Chrono Trigger, we're gonna sell it for $90. Like, they just treated NES and everything as just a blanket. Like, certain games would get certain higher dollars and stuff, but like, we never. It was crazy because there were moments where shit came in and we were telling people to, like, please don't trade this in here. Like,
no, I've been there before. So, you know, I used to work at a GameStop, and when I was a little younger and I was in my high school days, and I would tell people all the time when they'd bring stuff in, I'd be like, listen, like, we used to have a competing game company that was across the street from us. Shout out to Brian's Video Trader. And they were definitely based off of collectibles and rarity in games, to where GameStop at the time, it was EB Games, obviously was not. And people would bring in stuff that was just I mean, it was, not only was it older, some of it was far more rare than what they probably understood. So I would just be like, hey, like, you don't want to trade this in here for $1.50. Trust me. Yeah, it's not worth it to you to do this. Please go across the street to someone who's going to take care of this for you.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, there was one moment where we had a person come in with Suikoden 1 and 2 in the big box, perfect condition. And we were going to give him $2 for it. And it was me and my brother-in-law at the time, and my brother-in-law literally told him, he's like, please don't do this. He's like, because my brother-in-law collects games and he loves games, and he's just like, he literally told the guy, he's like, please don't do this, don't. And the guy's like, what are you talking about? And we explained it all, like, you don't realize how rare these games are. Mm-hmm. These are in perfect fucking condition. Yeah, he's like, what I want you to do is, I want you to go on eBay, I want you to sell them there, and then what I want you to do is come back and spend the money you would have gotten at eBay here instead. And he's like, done. And then he leaves, comes back like 2 or 3 weeks later, got like $300, and he's like, thank you, because now I get all this shit now. And he's like, that's the only thing I want you to do. I want you to come back and just spend the money here. And
that's good customer service,
right? And the guy actually followed through. He's like, you guys actually saved me a lot of, he's like, you guys got me way more money, because we would have given him like $5-6.
Yeah, so. and you, since you worked in a game store too, you kind of understand the practice of what we did was never necessarily like predatory. It was just very advantageous to taking from the lazy, essentially. You know, people who didn't want to do any of the legwork to trade or sell an item.
Correct.
Even then, they just didn't care what it was worth at that point. They just wanted whatever money they could get for it at the time. Or it was stolen. I mean, we dealt with that a lot too, which I'm sure you did. You know, coming from the area that you came from, you know, you used to deal with that a lot too. So
I used to get a lot of people would come in and just be like, they would have 3 copies of a brand new game the day that came out and goes, I want to get cash for it. And our store didn't do cash, so we turned away so many fucking people that were just coming in. I'm like, oh, you have 3 copies of Madden 2005 now.
Where'd you get all those?
That came out yesterday. Where the fuck did you get that? Very rarely did we have situations where it was like cops showing up to like take shit that was stolen, thank God. But I mean, I'm sure, like, you're right though, when it came to people just straight being lazy and also not giving a fuck. Like,
oh yeah, definitely. I mean, we ran into the same situations where people would come in with consoles where the serial numbers are scratched off, and we're like, hey, what's this? And you know, they would just be like, I had no idea. I just had, the system's been in my house for a month. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to have to go ahead and turn you away, buddy. Sorry.
The worst was like, and the only thing that sucked is like the Game Boys, for example, Game Boy Advances, the serial numbers would scratch off just because they were in the shittiest spots ever. And just by wear and tear of putting it in and out of your pocket and all that shit, it would wear off. And I'd be like, can't do it, man. Sorry. And there's
you could rub your pinkies across those things and they would just be worthless.
And it's like, you're just going to rub it all away. So that's wonderful. I'm sure you also dealt with, probably the worst of the worst, because I think the worst thing ever is somebody tried trading in an N64 that looked like, instead of a game, they put like a fucking peanut butter and jelly sandwich into the game cartridge slot, and I'm like, I am not doing this.
The worst one that we had so far was one of my old managers. Her name was Angel, and she was kind of like a germaphobe. And someone had attempted to trade in one of the original Xbox, like the original launch Xboxes. And when she tried to trade it in, like, you could just see down the side of it that it was so caked in like some type of soda. Like, because you remember how they had all of like the little air duct slots down the sides. Like one whole side of it was completely caked shut because it seemed like someone had the console sitting in sideways and someone had like just poured it onto the top of it. It was the most disgusting thing I had ever seen. Oh, it was terrible.
Yeah, we had to tell people all the time, like, no, we're not doing this. Like, this is fucking gross. Like, we're not going to trade this in and then spend 3 hours in the back trying to clean it up, right? Like, no, thank you.
Like, yeah, we're just going to turn around and throw it into a trash can.
Yeah, exactly. So we're not doing that shit. And then of course you get the people that walk in that smell of all sorts of weed. Just like, I had somebody walk in and literally Hollywood Video, which was like in a cave. Like, we were inside of a Hollywood Video. People down the fucking other side of the building were like, God damn.
Yeah, weed and butt usually were the two most prominent smells you'd get out of a space like that.
Of course. And then when you shove 50 people into a store at a midnight launch that's the size of like a studio apartment, that's always fun too.
Yeah, that's always a great time.
Jesus. So you went Dreamcast. And then...
So obviously with the Dreamcast, we had to skip over the PlayStation 2 because it came so quickly.
Right.
After. So at that time...
Because you can't turn around and ask for that shit when you just got a Dreamcast, right?
Oh, buddy, that turned into a situation. But, at that time, you got a little bit of freedom because you're starting to hit your teenage years. I think at the time that that system came out, I was 12 going on 13, so I was just going into middle school. I had a really good friend at the time named Anthony who had just gotten the PS2, and I would literally just ride my bike to his house every day and we would play for hours and then I'd come home. So I didn't really miss a lot of the like the PS2 classics just because I had so many close friends in proximity that were always playing games with me too. So like whenever they wanted to hit me up for my Dreamcast, they'd come through, and vice versa. Whenever we wanted to play PS2, we'd roll through to play, because the PS2 at the time, even not long after launch, had a ton of like really good like multiplayer titles. So
yeah, and that was the other thing too, is always having a good friend who had the other thing. So that way you could just go to their house and spend hours. Like I remember my buddy Jared, because again, I was skateboarding at the time, and I mean, PS2 launched, and dudes were coming into school the next day, like, I got a PS2. And that was like a big fucking deal. And they were talking about how they played Madden 01, and it was incredible. And I'm like, okay, I don't really give a shit right now. Because it's like, is Tony Hawk on it? Can I play Tony Hawk 3? I was one of those assholes that was asking for Tony Hawk 3 on PlayStation 1 because I did not have a PS2 at the time. So I got all these like mean looks like, the fuck are you asking for this on PS1 for? What's wrong with you? Are you broke or something? I'm like, no, I just don't give a shit to get a PS2 yet. But then my buddy's like, hey, I got a PS2 in Grand Theft Auto 3. And that was it. Like,
that's really funny.
I was like, Jesus, look at this shit.
I actually have a really similar story to what you just said there, because in the gap in between the Xbox and Xbox 360 generation, I remember right after the 360 had launched, I had gone into a GameStop after I had gotten paid, and I wanted to pick up a copy of Half-Life 2 and Indigo Prophecy for the original Xbox. And somebody asked me almost an identical question. They were like, do you not own a 360 yet? And mind you, the console had literally been out for like 4 weeks. Okay.
Right.
So for someone to ask me that question, I was just like, you know what?
Fuck
you're kind of an asshole, and I don't appreciate that. But,
Dude,
but that's just fun. I just had a similar story. Yeah, I know.
How elitist of him. He's just like, ugh, you're still asking for shit on that old box. Like, dude, fuck yourself right now.
And it come to find out that both those games turned out, one was a great console port for Half-Life 2, and then Indigo Prophecy turned out to be a really good game too. So,
right. So fuck you for being all judgy and shit. Like,
sorry, I enjoy things, buddy.
Sorry, dude. I mean, that's the thing is, like, when I worked at Game Crazy, we had all consoles. So I never felt like that. I never felt like, oh, he's coming in asking for games on an old system, because we had fucking NES games and up. I'm like, people would come in and ask for NES games and shit. I'd be like, they're right over there. Like, it's, I never got to that point. Like, yeah, you go into a GameStop though, it's like, oh, you still have that console? Like,
yeah. So, but so to go with that too, so I kind of breezed through the PlayStation 2 era on the backs of my friends, just because I didn't have a job. Obviously, I was young, but I never had to worry about it because, it's like every weekend you were staying at someone's house, or you were kind of, going through those motions. But
right. You didn't need your own.
Yeah, so, you played the Grand Theft Autos. You'd watch one of your buddies play GTA. You guys would kind of like, swap back and forth. NBA Street was like a really big game for like my circle of friends. Both the first and like Volume 2. We used to just crush those games, it seems like. And then a really good story was Anthony, the friend that I was telling you about that I originally was like playing the PS2 with all of the time. His dad had gone out, and his dad was like more of a stern guy. So it was always really funny to like whenever he would ask a question about games or like we would try to explain something to him. It made no sense to him. So one day he talked his dad into buying him a game. The game just happened to be State of Emergency. I don't know if you remember that game or not.
Fucking trash.
So he gets it, brings it. He calls me. He hits me up on the landline. Hey, come down. I just got this new game. I'm like, cool. I'm on my way. Riding my bike down there, and it's called State of Emergency. And for people who have played it, it's very. It's just bad. It's bad. And he put it into the system, turns it on. He's like, oh man, it looks like such a cool game. And I think he played it for maybe 20 minutes, and he was like, it's just pure repetition. I mean, the game is literally just pure repetition. And and he's shooting, he's using a bazooka, and then he's just like, I hate this. He's like, he's like, how do I tell my dad that I absolutely hate this and that I want him to take it back? and we essentially came to the conclusion that you're just stuck with it because it's like impossible. Like you can't have that conversation with him to like get him to return it because you gave him so much shtick to get it into your hands that you just don't have a choice but to just deal with this bad game. And he ended up playing that game forever too. I mean, just because he was so dedicated to like not having to ask to get it returned that he just decided to keep it and play it and waste all those hours.
Yeah. So what I think with like a State of Emergency, the funny thing with that is I remember people making a big deal of that game, and I started wondering why. I was like, who the fuck would make a big deal of this and everything? And then I go and look. Basically, the advertisements for it were flat out said from the makers of Grand Theft Auto.
Oh yeah, and I remember a lot of people compared the two.
Yeah, and I remember just that alone probably was just, because people were just fucking hounding for that next Grand Theft Auto game, and like people were just like, oh, this is the next Grand Theft Auto game, cool. But then you play it and it's just fucking bad. Like every review should have just been like, bad.
Yeah, just don't play. Controls bad, story non-existent, graphics. What am I looking at? It really was a very poor title, and it was.
But again, man, Rockstar had that fucking Grand Theft Auto name, so they could put that on from the makers of Grand Theft Auto, and they could put a turd in a box, and fucking people would have bought it. Which
it was
essentially was. Yeah.
It was kind of fun to play for a few minutes, though. I'm not
for a few minutes, but it was a rental. But you're right, dude. When you got a bad game, especially as like a gift or anything like that, or you had to beg your dad to go get this, and it sucked.
Oh yeah,
fucking worst feeling ever, man. Like, you can't. Absolutely. What are you gonna do? You're gonna sit there and be like, Dad, this is not acceptable. And he'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
No, you can't do that shit. So, obviously, did you ever guys, you or Bryant, ever get into handheld games? Game Boy,
yeah, I mean, we kind of dabbled. I would say we were both pretty much adults when we got to a point where we decided to really go handheld. I mean, the original DS was really when I kind of like jumped in. We didn't do much with the Game Boy Advance, the SPs. We would use them. I think we had one at one time. I can't remember which one specifically, but I mean. Not really something. I was definitely more like a bona fide like console gamer.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the same boat because, I mean, I didn't really play Game Boy as much until Pokemon happened. But even then, I was more Game Boy Color. I didn't get an Advance until, like, later in its life cycle and stuff. But, DS, I think I was same boat, though, where I worked at the game store when DS came out. So that's when I was like, yeah, this DS is going to be awesome. I'm going to get it right away. And I got that old gray fucking Gen 1 DS, which was so abysmal.
When you really look back at it, the design of it was probably one of the worst designed consoles I've ever seen.
Like, it was so bad. I mean, again, at the time we were losing our shit, but then like, it's so sad when the DS Lite came out, you literally looked at what you had and was like, this is a fucking turd. Like, the screen's bigger, the stylus is bigger, the screen's brighter, like, this thing is better in every fucking way, and this thing looks old and awful now.
I remember it. Not even the new design of the DS Lite was really sleek looking, but the thing that caught my eye the most, like in the disparity between the two, was the contrast of the two screens. It was insane.
Right. It's ridiculous. And I remember just being bummed out because I remember I bought mine launch, and then I also got one shortly after for my wife, for Jen. I got one for her. She got I got the Mario Kart one, like the red with the M on it. I was like, this is awesome. And then literally, I think like a year or two later, the Lite came out, and I was like, yo, fuck both of these. These things suck.
Yeah, in reference to just like portable gaming as a whole, really the only handheld that I did at all was the Pokemon series. That was it. I mean, all the way up into the DS.
Yeah, basically. I mean, to be honest, though, like, I mean, I know there's good Game Boy games. I know people are, like, probably listening and going, what the fuck? Did you never play blah, blah, blah? But, like, I remember Zelda was on my friend Gary. He had a Game Boy, the original Zelda for that. That was cool and all, but I never, like, it was his. I never sat there and just played it, beat the whole game. But I get to play that shit now, like, on Switch. So, I mean, that's cool.
I do remember my mother. She had like she had an original Game Boy that she had acquired from, I don't know if it was one of her friends or where, but she grew like an infatuation with the Tetris, the original Tetris game, and she would just like sit on her end of the couch at night when we were all watching TV and just smash Tetris for like 2.5 hours straight.
Right. Give her Switch, give her Tetris 99, and she'll be like, "This is the greatest thing ever."
Oh man, I'm sure she'd enjoy it.
No, dude, like I remember, like it was just mostly Pokemon. I had other games, but like when DS came out is when I started getting besides Pokemon shit. I was like,
for sure,
okay,
that was the console that I started to branch out beyond Pokemon in the mobile genre, for sure, the handheld genre.
I remember like one of my favorite games of DS was the Castlevania Dawn of Sorrows. Like those Castlevania games, those like basically Symphony of the Night 2D side scrolling like Metroidvania games. Those are fucking awesome. Like they're good, except for the whole doing spells, because that was when it was gimmicky. It's like, do spells by drawing this symbol on the screen. I'm like, yeah, exactly what I want to do. Fucking stop moving move my hands in the middle of the screen and draw some stupid symbol for this spell. Like,
yeah, I would say, like, believe it or not, Nintendogs was actually a very fun game to play.
It was awesome.
I feel like that game was both overrated and underrated by a lot of different people. And then the Ace Attorney series, Phoenix Wright, was always super fun for me. I love those games.
I just like how it branched out into, for me at least, different game, but also like genres of games that just like I didn't even realize, you know? Like I remember when Nintendogs got announced, I was like, who the fuck wants to play a dog game? And then, because again, like when you hear just, there's a game where you have a dog. People don't like hear it, but then when you see what all you can do in the game, like when you actually see a gameplay video of what can be done in the game, you're like, okay, that's actually really cool. And that's actually the only reason why I started liking Huskies, honestly, because like I had a dog and I saw other dogs, but I wasn't so into dogs that I knew there were different breeds and shit. Like I just didn't realize, like I knew there was different sizes in dogs, but I never saw a Husky before ever until that game. And I was like, that's a cool ass looking dog. And now I have one. So
isn't that funny how that gaming like all incorporates into your life at some point?
Yeah, exactly. It's like Nintendogs. Well, the only thing that's cool is Nintendogs are way easier because they don't chew up shit and throw up in your house and stuff. So it's a little bit easier to take care of.
For sure.
But that's all right. So then obviously you were not really PS2, but you did play quite a bit and everything. What was the next console that you guys jumped into after that? So did you skip
the original Xbox?
The original Xbox.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
This was the dawning of a new age for me. The console war obviously exists. I mean, and it still exists to this day, even for all of us that are in our 30s and 40s and 50s that are still gaming. And I remember I was. And it's so funny how I kind of got introduced to the Xbox because, Microsoft releasing a console, I was an avid computer user at this time, so I was very familiar with Microsoft as a software company,
right? Not
as a hardware company. And I remember one day I was I was 8th grade, and I was standing at my locker, and one of my teachers walked up to me, and I was a really big fan of Blink-182. Going into my teenage years. Yeah, shout out to Blink-182. And I had a sticker in my locker from their Take Off Your Pants and Jacket album. And a teacher, his name was Mr. Howard, he came over and he's like, hey, you can't have this sticker in your locker. And I was like, why? I was like, it's just telling him to take off your pants and jacket. And he's like, because it symbolizes other things. And I was like, oh, okay. So take the sticker down. And then we just happened to continue a conversation, and he was just like, hey, sorry, I'm not trying to be rude or anything. He's like, I'm just really tired, yada, yada. And I was like, oh, what's going on? And he said that he was just up all night playing games.
Nice.
And I was like, what? I was like, I didn't know that you played games. So I was like, that's super cool. What are you playing? And then he told me about, the Xbox. And he was like, I started playing this game called Halo. And he's like, I literally cannot not think about it.
Right.
So I got so hooked into because of the way he was explaining it, I was like, "Oh, this
sounded
sounds
amazing.
Actually amazing." And he was a really cool teacher. So you kind of at that age you kind of gravitate toward certain teachers that you may like better than other people. And every day for the next 2 weeks straight, I would go ask him. I'd be like, "Hey, how's the game?" And he's like, "Oh man, it's so cool." And he'd tell me some new shit about it, and that it would just blow my mind as a kid that age thinking about gaming. And I was just like, I need to get this. So a couple weeks after that, we got a short break for the year. I think it was a week and a half. That entire week and a half, I spent basically just mowing lawns to make enough money to buy an Xbox. And I've been pretty much overweight, I would say, my entire from probably when I was about 10 or 11, all the way through a portion of my 20s. And that was a brutal amount of work to do, mowing that many yards. And, because the Midwest grass is 10 feet high sometimes.
Right.
And, but I busted my fucking ass to make enough money to just go to Toys R Us, shout out to the dead man, and buy an Xbox. I got an Xbox. I remember I got it with a copy of Halo, and I believe the original Splinter Cell were the first two games that I owned. And then it came with the combo pack, the Sega GT Jet Set Radio,
yep.
And played the shit out of Halo. I mean, just nonstop and front to back to front, every difficulty. Bryant played too. I mean, it was amazing. And from that moment forward, I mean, that game in itself really solidified my complete fandom to Microsoft over Sony, as a console. I mean, I love that game so much. And then I started playing the Splinter Cell series, and it's it hit me again. The Splinter Cell series turned into such a good series for me as well,
right.
That I just became I know that I've said addicted to video games a couple times already, but genuinely addicted to playing video games.
I think, Halo, fucking Jesus, dude. Halo was that one because it was, again, multiplayer focused, but also was a good single player. But dude, especially, again, you had your brother right there who was like, yo, let's go, let's play.
Yeah.
And that's right there, having another person there to play games with, right? And then also Splinter Cell being Metal Gear adjacent. It was Xbox's Metal Gear because Metal Gear wasn't really going to Xbox at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was, dude, I remember, I never really played the first one. I remember because again, I had stopped games for a while. I got back into gaming literally in the middle of GameCube, PS2, Xbox. Because I worked at the store. I eventually got all three, but I remember Chaos Theory on Xbox was fucking crazy. I was like, this game is amazing.
Absolutely.
And they had the co-op, the co-op's campaigns kind of mission thing that you could do. Everybody talked about Pandora Tomorrow with Spies versus Mercs, which I never got a chance to play, but it sounded awesome afterwards. Hearing it, I'm like, fuck, man, that sounds really good. But then, of course, Halo 2 happens, and then if you have the internet in Halo 2, your fucking life is gone.
So, yeah, Halo 2 ended up really becoming the game of my teenage years for the simple fact that I had so many of my high school friends that were playing Halo 2 that we went and, we would scavenge Goodwills for 14, 15, 16-inch televisions so that we had enough TVs to be prepared for the LAN that we were going to have. We had a friend named Doug, and he was definitely the house that hosted the most of us.
Right.
And there would be times where we would spend days. Actual days, during the summer of school, when we were on break, we would be there at his house for 5-6 days in a row. And all of our parents knew where we were because we were literally in a basement playing Halo 2.
That's better than doing drugs on the corner, parents.
Yeah. So Doug was always definitely one of our more chill friends, and he would always host us, and we would go over and we'd go into the basement. And his dad worked in some type of tech company at the time, so they had just this brutally fast internet for our era. Just blew all of our doors off.
Dude,
and
I bet it was 5 megabit a second.
I want to say it was an equivalent to T1 at the time,
right?
Which was insane, for us to comprehend because we all were just kind of getting into the internet portion of it,
right.
And and we would go down there and we would have, between 6 and 8 boxes hooked up, and we would either LAN and play against each other, or we would jump into like groups and play online. And I mean, I to this day, I don't think that there's a game outside of World of Warcraft that I probably spent more physical hours playing than Halo 2 for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, it sucks because I wish they had the stats like they do now, where you could see actually how long you actually played it. Because I remember Halo 2 was a thing. This was before my wife and I had kids, and it was just me and her in an apartment, and we had 2 TVs side by side, so she could watch her bullshit and I could play my games, and everything was fine. But yeah, I mean, as far as it goes with Halo 2 was a thing I literally played every fucking day. I don't care if it was Christmas, birthdays, anniversaries, nothing. I got time in Halo 2 every single day for over a year. And it was without fail. Like, my wife just knew, like, yeah, you're going to play Halo. So
yeah. So with playing Halo nonstop with that group of friends, I also had in like a lateral group of friends that was very big into the GameCube. So when we would meet up, we would be playing Halo 2, and then we would switch over to like some GameCube titles. So like obviously like Super Smash Brothers was like a game that everyone played. We had a couple friends that were really addicted to Phantasy Star Online for the GameCube. I don't know if you remember that title or not. I do,
and it was like one of the only online games for the GameCube. I remember,
and it was crazy because it had a pretty good following, but it always looked dead when you would watch somebody play it, right. And it was just crazy. But
I remember selling the broadband adapter at Game Crazy. Like, what games does this even fucking work for? So we started just looking at games, like, and nothing. And then I was like, Phantasy Star. And I honestly don't even know what else.
Phantasy Star Online too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that was literally the only games that it would work for. So, but again, GameCube wasn't known for online at that time. You know what I mean? Like, what were you going to do there? So,
and it's so funny too, because like Halo 2 was obviously like my favorite game from the original Xbox, and but the GameCube really held some of my favorite titles of that generation. Like Super Mario Sunshine was definitely one of them. Beautiful Joe series was definitely one of them. I mean, I feel like the GameCube wasn't necessarily an underrated console, but it probably didn't get all the recognition that it deserved for like the actual good titles that it released.
Yeah, like there was just like GameCube, and well, also though too, that was when, dude, Resident Evil 4 came out first on GameCube. Like, that was, I remember I took the day off work for that shit, because my brother-in-law, when he came back from his because he was a manager, so they got to go to this conference in Vegas where they got to see all the new shit early, and that was the year, it was like Resident Evil 4 and Halo 2 were around the same time, and I just remember, because I was so fucking balls deep in Halo, I was like, how's Halo 2? How was it? Yeah. And he's like, it's cool. I'm like, no, you can't, you gotta fucking talk to me more about it. What do you mean it's cool? And he's like, all I want to do is play Resident Evil 4. And I'm like, really? He's like, you have no fucking clue. He's like, when you get this game, you're gonna see. And I remember working the day the demo came in the mail, and we were supposed to put it in the kiosk, and no one was in the store. So I was like, all right, cool, let me just play this game. I played the demo fucking like 10 times in a row. I was like, this is incredible. And I took the day off work for that shit. And now Nintendo's, they're getting love from like indies and stuff, but like Capcom, I don't think would ever do that shit again, where they're like, we're going to exclusively launch games on your system first over PlayStation and Xbox. Like, I don't think that shit would ever happen again now, just because, I mean, Switch maybe. Like, Switch has got a lot of good sales and stuff, but dude, yeah, Beautiful Joe, Killer 7, Resident Evil, like all the Resident Evil remakes, like they redid 2 and 3 on GameCube, which is fucking crazy. So yeah, dude, I remember Smash. That was the first Smash I played. I never played it on N64, but dude, GameCube was legit.
Yeah, it was a great console, but like I said, it kind of got pinched in between a lot of other really good stuff too. So
right. By the way, I looked up the GameCube broadband adapter. The 3 games that came out in the United States that worked online with the GameCube were Phantasy Star 1 and 2, 1 and 2 Plus, and 3.
Yeah, and that's what they were playing. I'll tell you, he used to sit in the basement and play that game by himself. We had one friend, and it was crazy. So
the only other thing apparently you could do is 1080 Avalanche and Mario Kart Double Dash and Kirby Air Ride. You could do like System Link with,
gotcha.
which is odd, because I never once heard anybody think that was a thing. So
yeah, we never used to. We never did that.
Yeah, when you thought System Link and online, obviously Xbox was like the first one that prominently was like putting it out there. Like, yes, this is what you could do with our console.
Yep. So once we, got the Xbox, that's when, and Brian too, man. I mean, we both became absolutely just zombies to playing games all the time. And this is kind of where we drew like some of our family members back in. I remember my cousin Jeff and my dad both started playing a game called Crimson Skies, the plane fighting game. And my dad got really big into that one. And then NHL Rivals 2004.
Which is equivalent to NFL Blitz if people
for whatever reason, we got 4 controllers for that console, and we would play that game for hours at a time. I mean, and just the 4 of us just playing, and it'd be like 31-0, 21-0 in a hockey game, and we just loved it. We just loved every second of it. It was just so much fun to play. So
I remember NFL or NHL when the 2K5 series came out, when those games launched, $20 brand new. And EA got fucking shook hard because they were like, holy shit, we're fucking up right now. I remember getting NHL 2K5 and being like top 7 in the world in that game on Xbox just because it was so fucking good. But there was also this really bad, I'm not going to say glitch or flaw, where if you just skated like to the left and straight across the goal, you could always hit it in on the other side of him. So like, I was just fucking ruining people doing that all day long. And of course I was cheap as shit and not doing as much as I could have to actually score legit goals. I was just like, let me get to this section where I could do this and I'd be able to win. But
that still exists in certain hockey games today too.
They haven't patched it out shit.
Yeah, I know. It's terrible.
That's all right. But no, like I never played Rivals. Like the only NHL game I remember playing was that. At least on the older consoles, like it was just 2K until like 2K just stopped making hockey games.
And they had a great line of games too, for sure. So that always sucked when they kind of went to the wayside with the sports titles.
That was a crazy day at the game store when we put in NFL 2K5 into the game console. And I remember people coming up not knowing it was 2K, and they were like, yo, the new Madden's crazy. I'm like, actually, that's 2K. And it's $20. And everybody's like, dude,
give me it.
Sold through them so fucking fast. They were like, just give me this. Like, fuck Madden this year. And then the following year, they bought the exclusive NFL rights. So
you got to do what you got to do to stay number one.
So scared. That was the best.
For sure.
So, and then, and you guys obviously... So did you ever have internet at your house to where you were playing online with these people, or it was just at your buddy's house?
Yeah, so the Xbox was the first console that we had that had like the true internet connectivity that we got.
Right.
We actually talked our dad into upgrading because at the time we were still on a dial-up connection. We were able to talk him into cable internet for the first time.
That's right.
To play online with this console. So one of the first games I remember playing online with it was Counter-Strike, when they did the console port version for Counter-Strike. And then, of course, the Halo titles and a couple of others. So,
right. That's always, I mean, and of course, like, by the way, I forgot to ask, did Brian ever split the cost of the console with you, or was that just you?
Oh, no. He definitely put in work. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it was a shared console.
Both of you busting your ass. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. We were each responsible for a certain portion to make it happen. So absolutely.
Yeah. I was to say, you had to do that, especially with how often I'm sure he was playing and everything.
Absolutely.
So then as you're growing up, obviously you go 360. And I mean, this is probably when I met you. Like, I think I met you, obviously 360 was the generation when I actually met you because, so what year did Bryant move out here? And like obviously your parents moved out here and everything.
I want to say it was like 2008 was the year that they moved out here. Maybe it was 2009. And then I came out, I think it was a year and a half, 2 years following that. So,
obviously, you guys had 360. I mean, when did you work at the game store? That was obviously in Ohio. You didn't work at the game store.
Yeah, so I worked at EB Games / GameStop back when they were doing the transition in the early 2000s. So I think I was there from, I want to say like 2003 to 2005.
Okay.
So I was there for the tail end of the
PS2
Xbox PS2 gen into the PlayStation 3 Xbox 360. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So
yeah, I quit working there like right the year, I think it was 2006. It was the year that following Christmas, it was Wii and PS3.
Gotcha.
Like, I worked during the 360 launch. I remember that because that was a fucking bad time.
Yeah, that was a disaster launch, man. It was just...
If your consoles, dude, all the time, like, we had a big old notice, if people come in with Red Ring, tell them to call Microsoft.
Yep. That's exactly what we had to do, too. They were like, listen, if this console comes back today, like, busted, they go directly to the horse, you know? And we said, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
It was just, but we got the same kind of memos and notices. And, I mean, you know, console production is obviously going to have its gaps, but they definitely had quite a few more bad consoles out of production than some others did. Yeah.
$1 billion problem for Microsoft. You know, it's okay. They can write that check.
Yeah, and again, I'll, you know, obviously I stand for Microsoft, so it's very easy for me to just say like, oh, well, you know, it happens. But I'm very aware of how bad it actually ended up being.
Yeah, it was like, dude, you remember you were just saying like having to go back to your dad and tell him, man, Dad, this game kind of sucks. Like, can you return it? Imagine being Peter Moore at Microsoft going, hey, Steve Ballmer, we fucked up. This is going to cost $1 billion. So they were just like, okay.
Yeah, so with the launch of like the 360, I mean, obviously I was still very much into console gaming, but at the time I was also I had done my first PC build, and that was also right around the time that I started playing World of Warcraft. So my timeline of World of Warcraft, and being absolutely addicted to that game.
I was gonna say not doing anything else with your life, because I'm sure like so many people got addicted to that shit to where that was their lives. Thank God I never got into that shit. Like, I just never got into MMOs, but like, I know the people that were just, they did, like, they were like the adults who should have known to shower and eat and sleep, but they didn't give a fuck because they just wanted to play WoW.
See, this was at a point too where it's funny you say that, because like I always ate, and you know, and I always showered because it was like the only time I spent away from the game. So it's like my reset, you know. I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go get some lunch. Like, it was never hard to walk away from as long as you were able to stop. Like, the one thing that I think that made World of Warcraft so addictive was the fact that it didn't really have like as much of a beginning, middle, and end, as much as it was just a progressive timeline that you could just kind of like work through at your own pace,
right?
You know, to get to in-game rating and things like that. So it was very easy to just be like, okay, well, I've completed these 12 things, you know, already today. Let me go ahead and take a stop here, and you know, I'll go and grab some lunch or something like that. So, but I had a couple of friends, Jonathan, Joey, and Courtney and Nate, that like those four people, like, we would pretty much play the game like nonstop. Right. And it was just always a ton of fun, because like the idea of World of Warcraft was so different than a lot of other games at the time, because it was really one of those first kind of like breakout MMOs to where it's just like, oh, just go explore this massive world, just you know, kind of do it on your own. And you were like, that sounds insane, let's give it a shot. And then it turned out to just be this incredibly fun game. You know, it was always very vibrant in color. There was always so many different types of you know, enemies in different areas and things to do. So it just became like just this really engrossing game for me, that really pulled me away from my console for quite.
Not to mention you had no end. Like, there's no end to it. Like, I mean, technically you can look at games like, you know, some people got pissed back in the day when a game wasn't 100 hours because like there was no you know, so if a game didn't hold your attention long enough. Now, like, games are super short. Some games are really, really long, but like, there's games that straight up don't fucking end. Like, you could just play it over and over and over to the point where it's still enjoyable. There's no end. And especially with a game like WoW, where it was ever expanding. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like a shooter where it's like, here's your maps and that's all we're going to do for this game ever. You know,
yeah, there was always new content for it. And, you know, it was $15 a month. I understand that. And people were always like, oh, well, you're okay with paying $15 a month. Like, me paying that $15 literally stopped me from buying $180 of video games probably every other week.
Right.
So that became like more of a money saver for me than a money waster. So
it was just a foreign concept back then of paying like so much money just for a game per month. But then like, look at it over the course of one game costs $60. I could spend 8 hours playing it and be done.
Yeah, using games as a service definitely has kind of like come to fruition nowadays too, with like Xbox Game Pass and things like that. I mean, so the idea of paying like monthly for game titles, I mean, that's definitely, they kind of spearheaded that, I think.
Yeah, well, it just made people realize like the value of a game, because as long as you put the money into the game, they were always expand. Now, if they took $15 a month and said, fuck you, we're not doing updates, like, then you can be mad. But like, when you're making that much money, well, look at Fortnite. Like, Fortnite's free entry. Obviously, there's skins that entice you to buy it, but like, they're never going to stop adding content to that game as long as it's making money. Like, they're going to always do that.
And that's probably the one reason why that game specifically will outlast any of the other, like free battle royale scopes, just because of their content creation compared to other companies it really is kind of bar none.
Yeah. Like that. I mean, I'm sure they have a team of hundreds of people that are just like rotating. All right, you make a skin. When you get released, you make another skin. You make another skin. And like every day they have new shit. And it's kind of crazy to think about. But I mean, hopefully, in my opinion, I hope Apex gets there to that point. But I don't know.
With the shrouded secrecy of like the battle pass release and everything like that, it's not really off to the best start, I guess. But I would definitely like to see them, be as good as Epic Games is.
But also too, Epic Games is a fucking humongous team. Like they have literally $1 billion behind them before Fortnite happened, and then like they have all these resources and stuff. So I'm not saying Respawn doesn't. Like they have EA money and all, but like. Sorry, Epic money is big. Like that's real fucking big.
No, absolutely.
But if anybody knows how to make content and microtransactions, the shit out of things, it's EA, right?
For sure. So,
but yeah, as far as it goes, so you went 360. Did you ever get? I'm assuming you got a Wii.
Yeah, so with basically everything beyond the Xbox, I had a job. So I bought every console moving forward. Up into this generation. So, the Xbox 360, the Wii, I did the PlayStation 3 at launch.
Oh my God.
Yeah, tell me about it. That was not only was it $600 or $599 US, but the game selection was okay. Resistance Fall of Man was like a really good title, but not enough to really like hold me over. So so that was probably one of my least favorite like launch consoles that I got. And then just into today, I mean, I have an Xbox One, I have an Xbox One S or One S, One X, and a PC, but that's pretty much all I've got for now. We're getting ready to likely get a Switch, I think, because there's enough content on it now that I would like to, awesome. Have another console variation in the house. But I kind of strayed away from the PS4 this generation. I think that it probably stems from my poor experience with the PlayStation 3 as well. So. Yeah.
Honestly, if the 5 becomes, which I am assuming the 5 is going to be backward compatible, because I think at this point in time, if they don't, they're going to fucking kill themselves with that. Like, you can't do that again. Like,
for sure.
You can't. So I think just get a 5 when that shit comes out and like go back and play all the good PS4 shit. Cause there is good things in the PS4. As far as it goes, like obviously you have an Xbox. I mean, all your multiplayer shit, or not multiplayer and multi-platform, especially with the X, like, sorry, Assassin's Creed Origins and Odyssey. Fuck.
Well, there's definitely a lot of different games. I mean, the One X really has been my favorite console to date, just for the fact that 4K gaming is insane. I mean, it really is insane, and it's so funny because Bryant obviously beat me to the 4K regime with, he bought his new television, he got his One X, and he's like, you got to see it. So I go over and I look at it, and I'm like, at the time he was only playing like the insects video, and I was like, this looks really good. I was like, I just don't know if it's worth it for me to get it yet or not. So then just one day, me and my wife were like, hey, let's go just look at a new TV just in case.
Yeah.
And we were like, we did some browsing around. We got an excellent deal on a Samsung 4K, so we pulled the trigger, and then she's gotten into gaming over the years as well. And Red Dead Redemption 2, when its release dropped, the GameStop had like a really good promotion with a trade-in where you got $100 off the console. You got $200 if you traded in a console toward it. And I think I ended up paying like $99 for a One X.
Blasted that deal to you in that group thread.
Oh my God. I remember you guys told me about it.
We were like,
and I did it. And it was amazing. Yeah, it was, because obviously I was still running the One at that time with you guys. And, I upgraded to the One X that night. I bought the copy of Red Dead for my wife, and then the One X, and I think I spent like $168 for both.
Ridiculous.
I was like, wow. I was like, this was such a great deal.
Yeah.
So, and I'll never look back, obviously, because the console itself is just, I mean, it really has been the most fun I've had playing games in a long time.
Absolutely. My favorite thing is the moment you had with Bryant. I gave Bryant when he came to my house to pick up the X, because I already had the 4K TV, I had the X, and I showed him Insects, which is funny. Like I showed him that, but then I was like, "Here's Gears 4," and he was just like, "Fuck, look at that shit." I'm like, "Yeah," and then immediately that night he sent the text. So what TV do you have? Like, What kind of TV? Is this a similar TV? Like, he was all about it.
I really think that jump from 720p to 1080p, like, it wasn't huge.
No.
And I thought that would be like the similar gap between 1080 to 4K.
No.
It was not.
No,
it's like definitely not. Yeah. It is insane how different it looks.
That and HDR, because like when you see things like with it on and off, like you're just like I remember the crazy one for me was honestly, it was Assassin's Creed Origins. Like on top of a pyramid, looking at the city, I'm like, this is fucking crazy. Like, I cannot imagine games looking more detailed than this. And of course, in 2 years, we're probably going to have some new Xbox that's going to blow our fucking minds apart again. And, you know, it'll always be fun. So, as far as it, like you said, you kind of mentioned your gaming habits today. Me and you just bullshit and we play Apex. We were playing Fortnite all the time, and now that's kind of done and over with.
Yeah, that game's over with for us.
Poor Kayla. She's like, Dad, do you want to play Fortnite? I'm like, maybe later.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying I won't play this again with you, but like,
probably not for now. Yeah. I understand.
Take a little bit of break. Before I forget to ask, what is the worst game you bought with your own money?
Hellgate London for PC, circa 2005.
Okay, so why is that? What is bad about that? Because number one, I just Google searched the image, and that front cover image is horrifying looking. But that doesn't lead me to believe it's a good game.
So per the conversation we were having a little bit ago, my friend Nate had recommended it because we were looking to take a little bit of a break from World of Warcraft, and there were a lot of other MMOs that were hitting the market, and this one was supposed to be, like the the WoW killer, or whatever you wanted to call it. And I think we installed this game. First off, it takes like 2 hours to install, and at that point, I was already kind of over it, but you begin playing it, you get your level 1 character, and it feels like you can literally run in a circle, maybe a square. And it lacked content, it lacked gameplay. I mean, graphically, it didn't look good. It was such a waste of money at the time. And I remember, we all went out and bought it 8 a.m. right as a Best Buy had opened, and I regretted it every single day since. And I still have the original copy. I still have the original copy
there, and then being like, "You're here for what? Hellgate? Okay."
Yeah. It turned out to be an absolute debacle, but I kept the original copy of the game that I still own to this day, just as a memoir to myself.
And it's a Games for Windows game, and it was made by EA.
Oh, it was so garbage, man.
It looks like a blast. It looks fun.
Yeah, I highly do not recommend.
A very big negative stamp of approval.
Yep, that'll be a yikes for me.
If people wanted to check you out on the internet and play games with you and all that jazz, where would they go?
I am on Twitter at Don Wuebos, Xbox Live at Don Wuebos, and every other social media outlet at Don Wuebos, DonWuebos.
And of course, you can check him out there to where he will share links of us and Apex memes and random sports memes and things like that. So you can check him out there. Dude, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for being episode 100, and I appreciate it, man.
No problem, man. Thank you.
All right, and again, thank you, Brandon, for being on the show. Guys, again, I just want to really show my appreciation and everything to thanking all of you who have listened to the show. Again, to me, thinking about doing 100 episodes of a show consistently, not missing a week, finding guests, getting to an opportunity to meet so many cool people throughout this show. Just all the people I've met, like Sean and Luke and Brock, and just all these cool people that I've met through this show, and how I've had so much fun working with all these people and doing podcasts and playing games and meeting these new people and these new friends through this show. I can't thank you guys enough. And for my buddy Brandon to ask to be episode 100, I couldn't have asked for a better guest. So again, thank you, Brandon. If you guys want to check him out on Twitter or on Xbox, it is at Don Wuebos. Of course, I'll also have it in the links in the show notes, so you can check him out there. Guys, if you want to be on the show to help continue this awesome show and see if I can get to episode 200, please send me a tweet at MitchPower1116 on Twitter, or at the podcast Twitter page, which is at GUG Podcast on Twitter. Of course, we also have a YouTube channel, so you can check us out there and watch the show there. You could also go ahead and follow the Facebook group. I'm just, again, kind of blown away that episode 100's here. I'm looking forward to getting to episode 200. If I can do that, that'll be a goddamn miracle. But I look forward to the challenge and see if I can get there. So again, don't forget to subscribe to the show, share it with your friends. I absolutely want to get to 200 now. Ever since getting here, didn't think I'd get here. I want to get to 200 now. So thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you guys for sharing the show and showing all your support. And I will catch you guys next week with another new episode. See ya.